Okay, so we got a film from Canada, and I regard it as one of the best films to come out of Canada in years. We have Pascal Plante and his brother doing the music for this movie as well.
There's been a lot of weird cases of brothers doing music for other brothers' movies in the past year. I've been seeing it a lot. I'm not against it.
No. So, speaking of trends, let's talk about Red Rooms.
Hey, welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for finding us. And for our loyal fans, thank you. Continue to support the show. I feel like we're doing a Red Room right here. Another way you can support the show, Joe, the Patreon. We have great deals, great opportunities, and great content. And, of course, an opportunity to tell us what movies we can view on a future episode with, of course, a shout-out to you as well. Kyle and I are members of the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Check out that webpage for critics' reviews as well as ours. And today we're talking about a movie that was accessible in Canada last year, but now it's accessible for all of us worldwide. It's Red Rooms.
Slow rollout.
Yeah.
The high-profile case of serial killer Ludovic Chevalier has just gone to trial, and Kellyanne is obsessed. When reality blurs with her morbid fantasies, she goes down a dark path to seek the final piece of the case's puzzle.
Red Rooms presents the case of not so much that we're kind of talking about serial killers, but how it can affects everybody that's a spectator to this. You know, the lawyers, the spectator, the victims, and everything. So it's not so much the serial killer, like, he's not even the least interesting person in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it feels like a movie where everybody wants to be a part of it unless you're actually a part of it. You know, and we're kind of
like
all
that.
like diving into the theater, the TV screen. And I think that's why a lot of like murder mystery television series and docuseries are so popular nowadays, is like everybody wants to like see if they can figure out the mystery. But the problem is, if you're in that situation, you don't want to be there. And you can see that from the mother. I think it's Elizabeth Locas's performance.
Wonderful.
She doesn't want to be there because what she's there for is horrific. But everybody else wants to be a part of it, especially those scenes of the reporters outside that are just trying to like nab every detail.
They're like eating up, like, how can we get the latest thing, right? You're right. The protagonist is Kellyanne, played by Juliette Galeapsi. I hope I'm saying it right. But she's fantastic in it. I almost feel like, is this really you are Kellyanne? But she's one of these that she's taking the obsession, but she thinks she can get herself out of it.
Yeah, and I think part of it is that her character is underwritten, and not in a bad way underwritten, but just like she's not really out there like with
we don't know her backstory, right?
Yeah.
We don't know why she got. We just almost start the story that she's just attending this. We don't know the reason, the compulsion,
and she doesn't really understand why what she's doing could be deemed as unusual or strange or odd, which is funny because she is a model. She is out there in the public image. Yeah. And yet she doesn't understand how important that public image is to her job.
She's losing jobs because of it now as you're being exposed. So I think it's calculated risk. You see the dynamic of the serial killer as well as Kellyanne. There's almost a very mirror image of calculating risk to keep their impulse, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, almost like she almost becomes like the serial killer being the spectator. There's a great camera play of the courtroom. I love how the camera pans. And, it's almost like a good play of the acting and panting, and they're like, okay, we look at this. So I love the intro. It's fascinating, even though it's just talking heads. But it feels like also two movies in one, because you have the court case, but also you have outside the court case, which could also be a short film itself, just her with the computer.
And I think that's where the movie kind of gets you where it doesn't get you. And I felt like the court case part was a bit underwhelming. And I know that you say it's not as important in the story, but like they spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah.
That I feel like it should be more important to the story, or at least it should have more going on in those sequences, because when it's really like a really accessible court case, like the scenes where they have to leave the room because they're going to show this horrific footage.
Yes.
That's a powerful moment in that film for the court case scene as well as for our viewership, because there are these two storylines kind of going on at the same time. And then you have, Kellyanne, who's perfectly fine with the fact that she's gotten a hold of this footage. And
she
she's
throws
just
it
gonna
all
show
in
off like it's a big deal.
Yeah, she risked all her Bitcoin in a gambling to pay for the footage so she can vicariously give it to the victims, and the victims can have access to it. But also, it's the consequence of this reaction
Yeah.
I think this is the second time I watched it. If you watch, it's more important of the reaction of things rather than seeing things. And I know my heavy criticism of Longlegs is we don't get to see the actual murders, but here this is not that important. The important is the reaction of seeing stuff, like her friend, played by Lauren Babin, who thinks that he is innocent, but you see them watch the movie. We don't actually see it, and you feel it. And so I think it's 100% a reaction movie rather than a reveal movie.
Yeah, well, that's why I personally, again, because my appreciation for Longlegs, I see that kind of symbionce that takes place, kind of like the film Seven, where we never actually see the murders taking place in Seven. We always see the aftermath.
Right.
And now this is kind of a reverberation of that too. We're not even seeing the aftermath; we're seeing the reaction to the aftermath.
Yes.
So it's taking that kind of one step further, and I think that's where the central story of Kellyanne and her friend are really at their strongest point, is where she's kind of completely emotionless about all this, but her friend is so emotionally invested in the fact that this guy has to be innocent that seeing things that might prove otherwise shatters her person. And I think that's where the film is at its strongest. And I would have liked to have seen more of that time she spent in the chat rooms and near the third act.
Online chat rooms?
I wanted more of that. See, that was my big criticism of the movie. I wanted more of a lot of this stuff to kind of just flesh itself out, because we do spend a lot of time in these areas.
Yeah, after the second viewing, you don't get enough. You feel like you need more input, and we're just not going to get it.
Yeah,
we don't get hardly any exposition, other than the court cases. Mm-hmm. So it's very like, I want more.
Yeah, and I think that's the almost like lasting impact, is that you're drawn into it, but you I need more like accessibility, because I'm positive on the movie. To be more positive, I would love to have had that element expanded upon.
And I love that ambiguity. I love that we don't really know much about Kellyanne, that she actually could be a bad guy herself, or she thinks she has the tools to actually do something heroic.
Well, that's the thing. I like her character, and I think we have enough of her character in the film. I think, like, as far as like a well-rounded character, we know enough about what she's putting at risk and how she doesn't really care.
I know where you're going.
The court case itself and that third act itself.
This should be like a 6-hour miniseries.
I think that expansion would have helped the overall narrative a bit. Yeah. Yeah.
Then you get enough time with the supporting, where you get enough with the court case. You can take an episode where you just do the court case.
Yeah. Well, because it seems like that's where they're headed at the beginning. There's that court opening.
It's fantastic.
The opening statements. Yeah. Very well shot. Very well performed. 19 minutes of a 100-minute movie. I mean, they really spend a fifth of that movie just opening the court case up. And so I think diving into the elements of it, at least for the people who are spending time during those scenes. And we could even do it through the lens of what Kellyanne is seeing. So that way it's not really like extra fluff that's unnecessary, but how she interprets those scenes more.
One of the things I really heavily criticize for writing workshops is usually watching stories. One of the things is like, I need to know the motivations. I don't really care about motivations. I don't care about Kellyanne's motivations. I don't care why the other girl thinks that he's innocent and why it motivates her. But I like how they flushed that out.
Yeah.
They don't really take time with the exposition of, well, I feel like I need to do this.
Yeah.
And that things like that, they don't cheat it that way. They give you come in with the experience. It's almost like a challenge of the audience.
Yeah.
Almost a spectator themselves.
Well, in cases like this film, much like Zodiac, we get enough of that. We get enough of the motivation, I think, in the story. We get the motivation that she doesn't really understand.
Right. But they don't dumb it down to you like, all right, let's sit and talk about it.
And it's much in the same way that we don't have motivation to witness a car crash. When there's a car crash happening, we don't look away, we look at. And that's the motivation, is that we want to understand the parts of our world that we don't understand. And I think that's enough motivation for her to drive the character, that we don't need to dive into like, well, my dad was a bald man who got arrested, and like, we don't need that.
Right. It's also the play of, what was the serial killer's motivation? Was it to get an audience and get money and keep doing it, or was it to make murder and then do the audience?
Yeah.
What was the chicken and egg kind of a thing? Because eventually broadcasting is what get him caught.
Yep.
Was that the main motivation, or motivation was kill and then get an audience? So there's a lot of, like reading with Kellyanne, I see a lot of mirror reflections of her and him.
Yeah, because honestly, all the details about him as a character, he's not really a character, and he doesn't need to be a character, because he's only viewed through her lens. So I like that we get just enough of him to kind of give us the ability to reflect what we see on him. Yeah. And specifically a scene where she's being dragged out of the courtroom, late second act, early third act.
My favorite part of the movie.
She's being dragged out, and Maxwell McCabe Locust, who plays the serial killer, looks at her, and that music kicks on. It's like somebody kicked a bee's nest, and now it's like the hornets are all moving around. So
executed flawlessly, because if he went catatonic, like, oh my god,
yeah,
you cheapen it for me. But that he's very subtle with, like, he caught her eye. He recognizes what you did, and it's like, kudos to you.
Yeah,
that kind of thing. I love it. It's subtle, it's subtextual, but it's also bombastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very loud moment that has meaning, that has impact, and again, that's a great scene of that, because we're seeing what she sees the court case as, which is kind of a play.
Right.
And then we see her reaction to it, and we see her being dragged out. So
a good catch. All right. I think if you're from Canada, you've already seen Red Rooms, and if you're from America, catch it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth checking out. And I do think there are movies about court cases, but there's not as many movies about fanatical fascination with them and that obsession that comes with it. And we kind of talked about it, like those keyboard warriors who try to uncover the details behind a case that end up in some ways damaging more than helping. And I think that's kind of what we have here, is we have this obsession that's driving someone to a place where they don't really fully understand any more than they did at the beginning.
And they're not going to recover. I don't think Kellyanne is going to get her reputation back.
No, probably not. Because especially people in her profession, they're a dime a dozen. Like you can find someone new, and they do immediately.
Exactly.
So,
right. And we're not going to stop having serial killers. Just one of those things, reality. So, what do you think of our assessment of Red Rooms? Leave a comment down below and keep the conversation going.
Yeah, and don't forget to check out GoFilmReviews.com. I've got my favorite movies for the year, my most anticipated of the year, and my top 20 favorite discoveries from 2023. That's all the old movies I watched.
Fantastic Four better be one of the most anticipated.
No, I don't think I have. I don't think I have any superhero movies.
No, okay, all right.
I had a cleansing year this year.
Flushed it all out. All right. Well, that's our assessment, and thanks for watching.